Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Peter Maynard, co-founder of SMB1001. Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's always good to have unique perspectives and a little bit of a global view. For those of you that don't know, if you couldn't figure it out, Peter is not based in the US. Peter hails currently from down under, and I had the opportunity to talk to several colleagues that have a shared interest in SMB1001, and of course, our conversations have evolved. And what I wanted to talk about today is just the challenges that you're seeing. I think we all are seeing some of the same ones, and it all seems to come back to one thing. And I hate to call it this, but risk does not seem to be a conversation that really any MSP wants to have, but more specifically, and we were talking about this earlier, the SMB space seems to think that they are, I don't want to say safe from the need to talk about risk, but that there's somehow this vortex, the cyber defenses, that the world around them doesn't really care about them because they're so small. Is that a safe assumption?
It's definitely been one that we've been working to. Is that and it has been in the past empirically. It absolutely has been. I'm too small. I have nothing of value. Why would they target me? What do I need to take action? And most importantly, we've got nothing to worry about. Our IT guys have got us covered.
Sure.
That's basically what I had heard for the last better part
I
of
like
10
that one. Our
years.
IT guy has it covered. What is it that your
Yeah,
IT guy does? I have no idea, but it's
no
covered.
idea.
Yeah,
No idea. But being able to say that confidently and convincingly to you allows me to go to sleep at night,
right.
and it gets you to retreat from being in front of my face. So you'll go
Sure.
away.
Right.
And
Phone
that's
stops
really
ringing.
absolutely that's it. I think one of the most telling things that we've come across over the last 12 months was a survey that was done by one of the major credit card companies, and it was done for across 1,000 small businesses here in Australia. And the businesses were asked, what are your biggest concerns and risks moving forward, so to say. And the top three concerns was continuing to make revenue and increasing revenue. Secondly was creating relationships that would lead to revenue creation. And third was reducing our costs. So that were the primary concerns of the SMBs.
Those in sequential order, like number one was,
Yeah,
number
one,
two.
two, yeah, 1, 2, and 3.
So, question about number two, because we say this in the States, like you can't rely at a certain point of word of mouth referrals because you run out of word of mouth referrals. But is that not been reached yet, or they just, I mean, because a lot of MSPs in my space still say that anyways. They're like, well,
Yeah,
we've done great with word of mouth. It's like, okay, like, but are you wanting to grow beyond that, or like
yeah.
that's enough?
You raised a great point there too. I think that point too could be looked more broadly as marketing
Sure.
and our ability to market. And interestingly enough, at a conference I went to recently that was speaking specifically to MSPs and their business acumen, this wasn't even on the list of a skill set to have. Yet
Sure.
when looked at by the leading credit card companies, it was a number 2 focus for most businesses out there. So that may be something that is specific in the IT sector. It probably is fairly similar in the accounting sector as well, if I'm
Sure.
going to be honest. Not the best marketers in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
Um,
you see in the accounting sector, because everybody needs accounting and no one wants to do math. There seems to
Absolutely.
be no shortage of referrals happening to those that do a good job at accounting.
Indeed. I think the most interesting thing from that survey, though, was that cybersecurity rated the lowest. And
Mm,
that was a really interesting discovery for me. It wasn't surprising. Empirically, it had been what I had observed in the market. That lots of words were spoken, no action or little action was taken, and was more than happy to rely on whatever the IT provider was providing.
sure.
So that then made me think, well, as security professionals, I've taken the view over the last 3 to 4 years that as security professionals, we need to be focused more on being good shepherds as opposed to deputized sheriffs out there that are looking to enforce the cybersecurity laws across our
Issue a
system.
ticket as opposed to tell
Yeah,
you why you got a ticket or how to
absolutely.
avoid getting one.
How to avoid the ticket,
Yeah.
how to protect ourselves. So what I had seen is that whenever I had spoken to a business and running a maturity assessment, and they'd be over 500 now, was yeah, cybersecurity is a massive concern to us. It's one of our biggest risks. Our IT guys have got us covered. But when we did that maturity assessment, if we were able to get through the process of doing that maturity assessment
Yeah.
because the business owner had pushed us away before we even got there, or the IT provider had stopped us from doing it, probably from a self-protection point at that stage, was that you would see enormous gaps in risk management. And it was an overinvestment in technical controls. I think that could be a localized problem in Australia because a lot of the guidance that we get in Australia is focused on technical
Sure.
control. But there was no preparation done in the ability to respond to an incident, or more importantly, to recover. It's almost that if you have these IT controls in place, you won't need to recover because you won't be attacked. But the figures don't say that. Australia is one of the most prized targeted locations in the world.
Right.
And I think it's for a lot of these reasons, sadly, Chris, and it's not the fault of the business owners. Australian small business owners are just like their American cousins. They're hardworking, they're heavily invested, they're family organizations with lots to lose. It's just the ecosystem that has been supporting them really probably hasn't been fit for purpose for their needs.
Sure. I mean, from a financial standpoint, I can't imagine defining how I want to grow my business by like, how do I reduce my costs?
Mm.
There's some things, I guess I think at the end of the day, these aren't necessarily unique to the challenges we have here. I mean, I think we say the same things. I'm too small. I think the MSP world here has shifted into more of like, I understand that I need to do these things, but I don't have time.
Yeah.
Or I have time to deliver cybersecurity services to my clients, but I haven't taken the time to execute or implement them internally for my own MSP.
Right,
And
Chris.
and I think the challenge is twofold. One, I believe for the last 20 years, the world of the quote managed service provider, and even if we go back to before it was called that, all had a couple similar goals in mind. One, increase profitability. We all wanted that. Usually
Yep.
that meant have more clients or better clients. Maybe we even started really standardizing on the type of client we were providing
Yep.
services to. And then we were concerned about reducing cost, not so much about increasing profitability. And one thing that I think has happened in the last 4 or 5 years that makes the timing now, if you're an MSP, somewhat brilliant, is that there are tools today that didn't exist 5, 10 years ago with regards to enabling the discovery of the enabling of efficiencies, the reduction in FTE resources, but largely in areas that are not cybersecurity centric. And as an MSP, we're like, well, when it becomes a tool, then I can invest in it because that doesn't take away from I haven't added FTEs to put tools
Yeah.
in. And I think this is the one area where we need the most eyes on glass is when it comes to cybersecurity. And obviously AI is going to have, I think, a very positive impact in the not too distant future on the ability to help corral the amount of data and help reduce false positives. But the reality is this is not a commoditized area. You know,
Mm.
I can deploy an RMM tool, I can deploy AV, I can, patch management and some of those things. That's become very commoditized in a lot of areas across the globe. But what has
Yeah.
not become commoditized is, reducing the impact of bad things happening without really do consultative delivery of services around things like, no, we have to execute SSO, et cetera. And then the second one is, and you said this at the beginning, my MSP is already doing those things. Based on what criteria have you come to that conclusion? Because I think that's where we have a need to wake up and educate the world at large around, if you're going to hire an MSP, you need to have an understanding of, at a minimum, these dozen, 50, I don't care how many, you can start with one thing, that they're doing
Yeah.
some of these things in my environment or helping me achieve these are being done well before I assume that they're just being done. Because if I'm not participating in the conversation or in the responsibility of this being done, no one's going to do this for me.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And I've seen the whole spectrum of MSPs, just to what you've spoken to, the ones that understand the incredible risk that comes with their risk and responsibility that comes with their job as a provider and as one that holds the keys to the castle, so to say. All the way back to the ones that are looking to how do we monetize this, and how can we just put money into the business without necessarily addressing the risk. And you're right, not every doctor that graduates from university got sevens.
Right.
Lots got much lower scores. Simpsons is a perfect example, as Dr. Nick Riviera, for example, he was a great example of not every doctor was brilliant.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
That, that's a really important point. And it was one of the key tenets of SMB 1001, whilst the attempt was to simplify the language that's used in a standard, in one that's typically been a confusing area for the businesses that needed to be able to implement. And really, there hasn't been a standard specifically made just for a small business. So they
Sure.
were always trying to interpret something that was for someone in a higher grade than where they were at.
Or legacy, right? They use lots of
Yeah.
legacy safeguards. You get lost in the legacy safeguards, and then you're like, well, which ones of these actually matter to me? Well, they all do, even if they are legacy, and that makes it even more
Absolutely.
complicated.
You're dead right. So the purpose of the standard was also, if all I ever heard was, well, my IT guy's got us covered, well, let's make sure that every IT guy that tells us that is singing off the same hymn sheet at the very least. It did two
And
things.
at
It
least in the
it
right colored hymnal, right? It could be the red one and it's not the blue
exactly.
one, then you got a bigger problem on your hands.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It also helped. It also helped the MSP, especially in Australia. I think a lot of MSP and IT providers here in Australia have sort of come to a roadblock where they've tried for years and years and years and years to move the dial with cybersecurity and cyber resilience uplift and maturity uplift with their customers, but where the source of guidance that it was all coming from really didn't help them on that journey.
Sure.
Well, how do we implement these 8 controls, and once we've made that investment, what do we get to show for it?
Or we're
And
done.
we're
Like
done.
we're done. We don't have to do anymore because we've
Don't
done
have to
the
do
eight
anymore.
things. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So what it's done is it's simplified. First of all, it's made very transparent to a small business owner
Sure.
what they needed to do to be good, better, or best, and if they wanted to go beyond that. But more importantly, I think it's standardized for the MSP providers and the IT providers that these small businesses will always look to for their cybersecurity guidance on what they needed to be delivering as
Sure.
services. These businesses don't need a $30,000 firewall. They need no-cost MFA turned on all of their email accounts, including their
Sure.
administrative accounts. They need simple policies to help them avoid invoice fraud, which is probably going to be the way that they go out of business. But
In
no
many
one's been
cases, for
telling them
sure.
that.
Yeah.
So that
It,
that's that was really the intention.
So the whole risk management concept, I think, comes into play here, and it reminds me of, the health and the culture of an organization. Drucker says, culture will eat strategy for breakfast, and then
Yeah,
you have the more current one, which would be the Patrick Lencioni, where he says, why organizational health trumps everything else in business. And I
yeah,
think what we have for a long time struggled with is when it comes to organizational health, cybersecurity is as important or critical as sales and operations and HR and all of those components that make up what encompasses, the will of an organization to move forward in any direction, based on
Mm.
what leadership and the maturity of the organization is showing. So if we are to be successful with something as critical as cybersecurity, well, then the health of the organization then is directly tied to cybersecurity being part of that culture and strategy and together moving that in one direction. Do you think that's I mean, I've read through the SMB 1001. I've read a lot of frameworks over the last few years that some make me just feel sad and depressed, and others give me hope that there is enough of a prescriptive guidance in the framework for any one organization to be successful based on their willingness to commit to the outcome
There you
that's
go.
desired in the
Yeah.
framework, right? And
Yeah.
and in generally speaking, and I'm sure you've heard this too, we're too small, it's too hard. I don't have time, so I can't even get started. And it goes back to what you said. But why don't you turn on MFA? I remember the days, and you could probably attest to this too, when it was easy to say that's a work problem, not a me problem. So when it
Yeah.
comes to what I do to log into my computer, if the password complexity needs to be 8 characters versus 20 characters or bajillion characters, if it's a work asset, I'm relying on my workplace to do that for me, regardless of how they're getting it done. And if they don't do
Yeah.
that, then I don't care. The strange part is in the consumer personal life of every single consumer out there, we've started to be forced down a path of things like to log into your bank account, please put in the secondary PIN code or some other form of additional authentication. We have to shift this whole thing onto that mindset. I personally have a responsibility to protect myself and my family and those I care about from bad things happening based on what I can do to keep them from happening. I can no longer just ignore at the workplace that someone else is going to do it for me. I have to take that consumer mentality now with me, its inconveniences and all, into the workplace and say, how do I participate in making a difference? And I think to a couple of the questions that come out of the SMB 1001, I think it does a great job of at least starting a small business on the journey of asking questions of themselves and who's helping them do the IT services. Now, granted, it's a slam dunk for an MSP if they read the first question and it says they need to engage a professional that can do these things. Awesome. But I think more often than not, you have the SMB world that says, I have that professional, my son, my cousin, we all have a family member that at least knows how to turn on a laptop. And in some cases, that's the epitome of the cybersecurity mastery course that's been taken and now embedded into your company. But then you start asking the questions that go beyond that. It's easy to ask the question to use a password manager. Most end users today would probably say yes, even if it's not a good one. Like, yeah, I've got them all in my
Yeah.
browser, which is probably enabling them to create better than the password
Mm.
that they can remember, which they have for 350 websites. It's a combination of some
True.
dog anniversary and fill in the blank, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But then you ask the second question, which gets a little bit more advanced. Is it centrally managed? And I think this is wherein lies the challenges that we see across all frameworks. You have to have somebody in a role within your organization with the responsibility to oversee and ensure that things are being handled and addressed in a meaningful way at a corporate level. And I don't use the word corporate in the sense that you have to be Fortune 1000, but like your company as an organization is choosing, and it may be the same person for all umpteen things that are in your list because there's only three of you or two of you
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
one, but
Yeah.
it has to happen, right? Like it can no longer just live in silos because silos are where things get broken, and bad guys love silos because they can
Yeah.
hide there for a very long period of time.
They
So,
do.
so really, I mean, the goals that you have is to target what we would consider is the global economic economy, right? Like the global economy is defined by the SMB. Maybe a
Mm.
little bit less so in the US than other countries are. our
Yeah.
percentage of what's considered SMB is a much lower number than say Australia
Yeah.
or Europe.
Yeah.
But the reality is that number is always going to continue climbing.
Correct.
Even when it collapses, right? Because it's a whole lot easier to start a company of one than it is a
Yeah.
company of 100.
Yeah. And the great thing too is it's infinitely easier to secure that company. That's the great
Yeah, if
thing.
you start at turning a
Yeah.
cruise ship is a whole lot more difficult than a speedboat.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you can
I think
navigate shallow water, right?
indeed, indeed. I think one of the things that I brought to the standard was not expertise in cybersecurity. It was far more around having empathy for a small business owner and a reality of what a small business owner is. I've lived small business all of
Wait,
my
yeah.
life.
And I
My
think
my
most
father,
people have, right? If we think about
yeah,
percentages in the space, most people have lived at some point in time in a small business.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that small business owner needs to be everything and do everything. I definitely think you see a change in engagement and culture when you move to an organization size that's accountable to a board. At that point in time, they're actually managing risk at some level.
Sure.
And it's not just being done from the hip, if at all, by the small business. But I think the most important concept that I stayed focused on through the whole journey was one that I even put myself into when I first met my mentor, and we spent 5 hours together in that steak restaurant in Mandalay Bay
Mm.
at Black Hat in 2015, and we
And
just
that's a
talked
good steak
cybersecurity.
place.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great evening. And I said to him, I said, look, I'm really interested in getting into cybersecurity. I want to be able to stand in front of small business and help them improve at scale because they
Mhm.
need to. It's just something they're going to have to do. Every business now is a technology business, and if you're a technology business, you've got your door wide open to cybercrime and risk. So, what can we do? I
Yeah.
said, I'm looking to you as the professor in cybersecurity. I'm in preschool and I need you to bring me up to about grade 3 or 4 level so I can help everyone that's in grade 1.
Right.
And that remains the case today. What I see time and time again, especially with assessments that get sent out, we've got small businesses here in Australia being sent assessments with 400 questions in them.
Yeah.
And the question I always ask is, as a grade 12 student doing advanced geometry and calculus, would you have any expectation that you could take that exam down to a grade 1 class and have that grade 1 student complete that exam? And the answer is absolutely no. They haven't even learned how to add or subtract yet. So, how can they do complex mathematical calculations? They can't. And
But you also have
cybersecurity,
the attention span problem too. A
exactly.
12, which is almost more to the problem, right? So even if we
Yeah.
had trivial questions at the 12th grade level that was only leveraging the math that the first grader knows, your
Yes.
first grader is not going to sit there and answer
No.
400 questions. The 12th
Exactly.
grader might not sit there and answer 400 questions, but I think that's to your point. If the
Yeah.
question volume was reduced down to a dozen or 2 dozen core conceptual
I don't
questions.
I don't even think you can ask questions because I come back to a point you made. Is it centrally managed? I would not be surprised if half of the participants that saw that question would be saying, who do they mean? The government? Is the government
Right.
managing the passport? Well, I don't want a password manager if the
Okay.
government's touching it. I'm not interested in it. The other really important part about the grade 1 persona as opposed to the grade 12 persona, the grade 1 persona doesn't understand risk. They don't understand what's dangerous behavior. They haven't
But they
learnt
can
that
be
yet about
taught.
data.
They
Well,
can be taught.
empirically, they've been taught by being breached or being attacked, and
No,
at
no, no.
that
I'm
point,
saying that
it's,
the first grade, assuming you get them before that B word has
yeah,
happened,
yeah,
they
yeah,
can be taught what risk looks like and understanding what risk means to their company. That
definitely,
12th
definitely,
grader, you may have a really big problem on your hands because they already have a preconceived idea of what
Yes.
risk is to their organization that's built on a bunch of lies over time. And it
Yes.
comes back to that age-old statement that says, I'm too small, no one cares. And then the
Yeah.
second one is, I have nothing for them to take, so they can take whatever. I will just reopen again tomorrow. And I
That's
always say,
true.
like, have you ever tried to file bankruptcy? It's not easy. And it's
Yeah.
not something you just like, oh yeah, today's Tuesday. We got LLP instead of LLC and we're good to go.
Yeah, no, I know. I know. Look, for me, empirically, as a boy, I learned by falling over. That's how I learned. I noticed my daughter learned differently. She was a little bit more risk averse than I was growing up. But I really think it's important that we give the SMBs the respect of where they are on their business journey. They're
Right.
not Coca-Cola. They're
I mean, we
not
need
they're
to
not.
incorporate it. It needs to be incorporated into their journey, to your point. Like
Yeah,
the
it
problem we
does.
have
It
right
does.
now, everything we've talked about with regards to cybersecurity, SMB 1001, the CompTIA Cybersecurity Trustmark, any framework,
Yes.
it's probably not specifically, well, I would, with the exception of the two that we were SMB 1001 and Trustmark, we're not even talking to a specific audience. We're
Yeah.
just saying, do you have to protect the following data type? And then
Yeah.
just saying, then do all of these things and be successful at it.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I hear what you're saying, and that really comes to the ultimate question. How do you drive authentic engagement? And for me, I'm I'm really confident that the only way you will drive authentic engagement is through economic incentive or economic drivers. For a small business, the to have a relationship with an organization like Best Buy or Walmart or a large organization is almost the holy grail for them. That's one of the most important things. That ticks off those top two issues in the survey. How do I maximize my revenue? How do I create relationships? If I'm at risk of losing that relationship because I failed to engage on cybersecurity, trust me, I will be engaged very, very quickly.
Sure.
And that's where we believe we will see massive change is when cyber certification becomes mandatory for a supply chain perspective from large organizations and from governments. That will create the economic incentive to actually move at scale the SMB sector. What was really important, though, was that if you're going to rely on that mechanism, first of all, make it achievable by who you're sending it to. If we're asking a catering company to complete a certification, make sure they can do it and make sure they can afford it. So
Yeah.
a certification
Raising the
like
bar
that,
over time as opposed to just saying,
absolutely.
we have a bar up here.
Yep.
You have
We're
this
never going
much
to
time
get
to
to it
figure out
till the
how to get over
line.
it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that's really the mechanism that we're confident will make that change. Up until SMB 1001, there hasn't been a valid solution that a large prime can conduct a whole of supply chain cyber assurance program based off certification because the certifications only existed for the enterprise end of their supply chain.
Yeah.
Now there's one that goes all the way down to their smallest, most insignificant supplier. And if we remember back to 2013, the HVAC company certainly wasn't an enterprise company. It was a
No.
small engineering firm with about 50 people that probably, if they had have been at the silver level, at the level two of SMB 1001, that attack wouldn't have occurred.
Yeah, and even if it would have, they would have at least had a much more in-depth awareness to understand that that was a potential risk, and they would probably have done a better
Exactly.
job of communicating with Target to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
sure that that didn't happen. I mean,
yeah,
I think that's also true on a we see this in the CMMC space, right? Like all of the supply chain will have to have
yeah,
meet some level, and it's pass
yeah.
fail. Like I can't imagine being a vendor that you just got told like
No,
you failed and
yeah,
you're like, well, okay,
yeah,
but now what?
yeah.
Come back
That's
again in a
exactly right.
year?
That's exactly right. It isn't black or white. It's not binary. And there needs to be that allowance for a journey to really occur. In my experience of any business that completed the level one requirements, the immediate turnaround was that was really simple. What's involved in us getting to the next level?
Yeah.
That's bona fide engagement. That's investment. We've seen, we made an investment, we got something for it. We got something we can market in the form of a certification so we can
Yeah.
show our clients and customers we've taken action. We want a better one now. And that's what's been missing.
Agreed. Wow, it sounds like you guys are really moving the needle, and I think it will create a the yin and yang of this in the MSP space. Because with the trust mark focusing on the MSPs, well, their
Yeah,
clients are largely in the SMB space. The SMBs, I
absolutely.
hope, are starting to ask questions of their service provider to say, "Hey,
Mm,
are how do I achieve these things, like where am I at on your radar as my MSP, like what improvements do I need to start participating in that I'm not aware of?" And I think that will start to push the envelope around, am I with the right MSP? Because
yeah, absolutely.
if they're not equipped to handle things like pushing me down a path of centralized password management or helping me achieve things like SSO across our account base, and how do I know if they are qualified to do those things? Because I think that's to your point, which really isn't part of the SMB requirement, is it doesn't say
Yeah,
in there like, oh, by the way, make sure that the qualification of the service provider is at this stamped level. But
yeah,
because those questions are being asked, obviously the organizations themselves will start driving, okay, well, what are we using as the benchmark to qualify
yeah.
those that are going to deliver services to us?
You raise an excellent point, and the CompTIA Trustmark is a great way of being able to demonstrate that. We've already had some early feedback from MSPs that really want to be able to demonstrate that higher level of assurance. So the certification body for SMB 1001 will be looking to implement that in the future. So having
Awesome.
a, having having a technical support specialist is one thing, having an accredited one is a double tick.
Yeah. And we all know ticks are better than checks, so we'll just go with that.
Absolutely.
For those of
Amen.
you listening, this has been an episode of MSP 1337. Thanks and have a great week.